Have you ever noticed the immediate, unthinking reflex that occurs the exact moment you find yourself alone in a quiet room, waiting for an elevator, or sitting by yourself at a coffee table? Within less than 3 seconds, your hand automatically reaches into your pocket, pulls out your smartphone, and unlocks the screen to plunge your mind into a chaotic flood of digital notifications, short videos, and endless streams of collective noise. This frantic behavioral loop is not driven by an intellectual desire for fresh data. It is a deep, subconscious flight mechanism designed by your ego to escape the terrifying discomfort of your own unedited presence. We exist in a fast-paced modern culture that conditions us to view any window of quietness as an emergency that must be immediately cured by external stimulation. But true personal expansion is never engineered amid the continuous chatter of the crowd. It begins with the radical choice to step off the grid and claim the immense power of conscious isolation. Welcome back to Everyday Better You, a dedicated sanctuary where we look past the superficial trends of personal growth and commit to becoming 1% better every single day. We spend our limited mental energy constantly reacting to the opinions, the emotional climates, and the moral demands of society, completely blind to the fact that we are leaving our internal kingdom completely untended. We confuse the heavy dread of loneliness with the sacred, transformative discipline of intentional solitude. Loneliness is a state of psychological starvation driven by the fear of being isolated from the tribe. Intentional solitude is an act of spiritual abundance where you choose to shut the doors to the world to enrich your true identity. Lean back, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to listen with your full presence. Right now, we are going to break out of the social matrix, silence the external noise, and reclaim the sovereign right to become an unshakable, brilliantly integrated force in your own magnificent company. Part 1. The dread of the empty room. Why we flee our own presence. In our ordinary daily routines, we inadvertently fall victim to a psychological condition that silently drains our vital internal energy and fractures our core sense of focus. We live in an unprecedented era of human history where silence has been systematically eradicated from the everyday environment. From the early moments of our morning to the final seconds before we sleep, our minds are continuously bombarded by an endless stream of digital notifications, algorithmic updates, and societal demands. This non-stop immersion in external noise creates a profound psychological dependency. We become intensely addicted to perpetual stimulation. The moment this digital matrix is temporarily removed, leaving us face to face with an empty room, a quiet house, or an unscheduled evening, our subconscious system immediately enters a state of deep survival panic. You feel a wave of restlessness wash over your body, and your inner voice spirals into intense self-criticism, forcing you to use mindless scrolling simply to escape the raw discomfort of sitting quietly with your own thoughts. The mistake we make is looking outward, desperately believing that if we can just fill our schedules with more social interactions, our internal anxiety will eventually dissolve. But you cannot cure a state of self-alienation by overfeeding your life with more external distraction. The brilliant French mathematician, physicist, and deep philosophical thinker, Blaise Pascal, provided a piercing, timeless light on this exact human vulnerability when he famously observed in his classic writings that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. This profound warning hits us with an absolute, sobering truth. Blaise Pascal forces us to recognize that our continuous errors, our reactive choices, and our endless patterns of self-sabotage are ultimately born from our desperate flight from ourselves. When you do not possess the psychological capacity to look into your own consciousness without panic, you will inevitably chase toxic relationships, make poor professional investments, and adopt superficial values simply to avoid the void of an empty room. The fundamental misconception of our fast-paced modern culture is the dangerous belief that being alone is an objective indicator of social failure, sadness, and isolation. We are heavily conditioned by media and collective metrics to believe that a life of high worth is one that is constantly surrounded by a cheering crowd, validated by a massive digital network, and validated by non-stop social engagements. This misunderstanding instantly turns your mind into a vulnerable fortress, keeping your nervous system permanently trapped in a state of hypervigilance. You begin to treat your own company as a punishment to be avoided at all costs, willingly sacrificing your authentic goals and your boundaries simply to stay connected to a collective circle that does not care about your growth. You enter a toxic cycle where you trade away your internal clarity to secure superficial belonging, leaving your soul emotionally hollow, deeply insecure, and intensely isolated even when you are physically surrounded by comfort. To apply this transformative awareness to your self-development journey and step into true self-sovereignty, you must intentionally reframe your relationship with silence. Start practicing small blocks of radical presence whenever you encounter an unscheduled moment in your daily routine. When you find yourself sitting alone in a vehicle or waiting for a meeting to begin, deliberately resist your automated physical instinct to pull out your technological devices. Step back into the position of the silent observer. Relax your shoulders, deepen your breathing, and allow the initial wave of mental restlessness to pass through your awareness without judgment or panic. Understand that the internal discomfort you are experiencing is not proof of failure, but a clear sign that your mind is successfully releasing the toxic overstimulation of the modern matrix. By having the absolute bravery to stay in the empty room, you permanently reclaim your cognitive sovereignty, protect your vital internal energy from depletion, and lay down the foundational bricks for an authentic, unshakable life. Part 2. Social media noise. How the digital matrix fragments the self. To permanently break free from the dread of the empty room and claim your absolute self-sovereignty, we must examine the specific mechanisms that fragment our consciousness in the modern digital era. Social media networks are not merely neutral communication platforms, they are highly complex digital ecosystems meticulously engineered to monetize your vital human attention. Every single time you browse through a feed, read a comment thread, or interact with an online group, your brain baseline is flooded with an overwhelming cascade of opinions, worldviews, and aesthetic standards that completely belong to total strangers. Because the human psyche is naturally wired to assimilate to its visual environment, your mind automatically begins to absorb these external narratives as if they were your own authentic truth. You slowly start modifying your vocabulary, altering your material desires, and editing your genuine opinions to match the consensus of a digital network. This continuous assimilation causes a profound internal fracture, leaving you thoroughly alienated from your true purpose and completely dependent on external validation on this path to become 1% better every single day. The highly respected Swiss psychiatrist and pioneer of analytical psychology, Carl Jung, provided a piercing light on this exact psychological erosion when he observed that the world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you. This deep biological warning forces us to look directly at the consequences of passive consumption. Carl Jung emphasizes that your core identity is an internal kingdom that must be consciously explored and guarded. When you refuse to spend time in quiet, independent reflection, you leave the gates of your mind completely wide open, allowing the chaotic, unedited consensus of a commercial society to rush in and overwrite your natural intuition. You become a psychological copy of the crowd, repeating slogans you have not analyzed, chasing milestones you do not care about, and wearing a polished mask that completely suffocates your authentic soul. The fundamental misconception of our technological age is believing that we can consume endless streams of digital information without altering our underlying belief systems. We tell ourselves that we can browse through filtered timelines for hours without letting the images affect our self-esteem, or that we can effortlessly disconnect from online gossip whenever we choose. But a psychological system cannot remain unaffected by its visual environment. When you continuously expose your subconscious mind to the peak milestones, the bitter conflicts, and the shallow trends of thousands of individuals, you actively crash your internal baseline. Your brain becomes completely starved for structural equilibrium, and your inner voice naturally spirals into intense self-criticism. You lose the ability to think originally because your cognitive bandwidth is entirely occupied by processing the synthetic lives of strangers on your glowing screen. Breaking free from this digital matrix requires a deliberate, strategic shift from passive absorption to conscious, cognitive insulation. To protect your mental clarity on this evolutionary journey, you must treat your attention as your most sacred internal asset. Reclaiming your personal power does not mean you must completely destroy your devices or live in absolute isolation from modern society. Instead, it means building a strict, conscious discipline around your digital consumption habits, actively starving the algorithms of your vital energy. Start implementing a rule to keep your phone completely away from your workspace for specific hours of your day, allowing your brain baseline to stabilize naturally without an immediate flood of collective noise. Choose to replace mindless scrolling with moments of deep, silent observation, grounding your awareness in your immediate physical environment. By choosing to consciously insulate your mind from the chaos of the digital world, You clear the toxic fog from your thoughts, restore your natural internal motivation, and regain the sovereign strength to build a brilliant life on your own terms. Part 3. The wisdom of intentional solitude, defining the sacred boundary. When we begin the difficult, messy work of insulating our minds from the chaos of the digital world, we must establish a clear intellectual distinction between two entirely different states of existence: loneliness and intentional solitude. Our modern society frequently blends these two concepts together, using them interchangeably to describe the basic state of being physically alone. This linguistic confusion creates a massive psychological barrier, causing individuals to avoid isolation out of a deep fear of emotional suffering. But in absolute psychological reality, loneliness and intentional solitude occupy completely opposite ends of the emotional spectrum. Loneliness is a state of energetic depletion, a painful feeling of emptiness driven by the ego's desperate craving for external approval, connection, and social verification. Intentional solitude, on the other hand, is a state of energetic abundance, a sacred boundary you deliberately construct around your awareness to nurture your authentic self, restore your focus, and step into true sovereignty. The brilliant transcendentalist essayist and deep philosophical thinker Henry David Thoreau provided a magnificent, piercing light on this absolute distinction when he wrote in his classic journals that I love to be alone. I never found the companion that was so companionable as solitude. This timeless declaration challenges the core narrative of our collective culture. Henry David Thoreau forces us to realize that your own company is not an empty space that requires urgent fulfillment from external sources. It is a rich, creative ecosystem that holds the vital raw materials for your ultimate growth. When you stop looking outward for validation and choose to fully step into your own presence, you discover an unshakable source of strength within your core, steadily cultivating an authentic life that improves 1% day by day. The ultimate mistake of our fast-paced modern era is the habit of treating human connection as a non-stop requirement for psychological safety. We run from meeting to meeting, message to message, and relationship to relationship, completely blind to the fact that you cannot genuinely connect with another human being if you are entirely disconnected from your own center. When you enter a relationship out of a deep terror of being alone, you are not acting from a place of genuine love. You are merely looking for an external mirror to distract you from your inner emptiness. You become highly demanding, intensely insecure, and easily destabilized by the minor shifts in their behavior. You trap yourself in a state of continuous emotional dependency, handing over the entire control panel of your nervous system to an external variable that you can never truly manipulate. Choosing to build a sacred boundary of intentional solitude is how you permanently break this exhausting cycle of emotional dependence. When you carve out dedicated blocks of time to sit alone with your mind, you give your subconscious system full permission to unpack its accumulated experiences, digest its emotional wounds, and align its actions with your core values. An unexpected weekend alone or a period of quiet isolation ceases to be interpreted by your ego as an existential threat or a symbol of abandonment. Instead, you step back into the sacred position of the silent observer, utilizing the unbothered space to audit your belief systems, clarify your career strategies, and deeply nurture your personal projects. You stop begging for validation from a distracted crowd, and you become a highly grounded force who is completely content in their own skin. To integrate this liberating discipline into your daily self-development routine, practice establishing an unapologetic boundary around your personal time. Dedicate at least 30 minutes of your evening to sitting in complete silence, completely free from digital screens, music, or conversational demands. Use this quiet window to check in with your core identity, tracking your thoughts in a physical journal with absolute honesty and compassion. Notice the specific anxieties that surface when the noise of the world is turned off, and allow those feelings to exist without immediate judgment or panic. Understand that constructing a sacred space for solitude is a patient, repetitive practice that demands small, daily acts of intentional boundary setting. By choosing to consciously honor your own company, you permanently strip the external crowd of its power to dictate your worth, reclaim your internal sovereignty, and build a brilliant life on your own unshakable terms. Part 4. Auditing your internal landscape, facing the hidden patterns. The moment you successfully establish the sacred boundary of intentional solitude and silence the external chatter of the world, your mind undergoes a massive, necessary transition. In the past, you spent an enormous amount of your vital mental energy looking outward, reacting to social triggers, and managing your public image to secure the validation of your peers. This continuous external focus allowed you to stay completely blind to the deep undercurrents of your own subconscious mind. When you choose to step into absolute silence, the protective masks worn by your ego naturally begin to dissolve, forcing you to look directly into your internal landscape. You confront your hidden self-doubts, your buried emotional wounds, and the repetitive behavioral patterns that have been quietly sabotaging your personal evolution. This phase of the journey is undeniably messy, uncomfortable, and intensely challenging, but it is the absolute prerequisite for true, sustainable transformation. The legendary pioneer of modern analytical psychology, Carl Jung, provided an unshakable, piercing light on this exact internal confrontation when he observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This deep biological truth forces us to take absolute, radical responsibility for our internal world. Carl Jung guides us to realize that the recurring bottlenecks in your career, the destructive cycles in your relationships, and the chronic states of anxiety you experience are not random acts of bad luck or external fate. They are the direct consequence of unexamined subconscious programs. The only way to permanently break these repetitive cycles is to enter the quiet fortress of solitude, sit present with your darkness, and carefully bring these hidden patterns into the clear light of conscious awareness to become 1% better every single day. The fundamental misconception of our modern self-help culture is the dangerous belief that personal growth should always feel smooth, positive, and immediately comforting. We are continuously bombarded with superficial motivational slogans that encourage us to simply ignore our negative thoughts, override our insecurities with empty positive affirmations, and focus exclusively on high vibrational metrics. But a psychological system cannot be genuinely healed by applying a surface-level cosmetic solution to a deep internal fracture. When you run away from your uncomfortable feelings by chasing immediate validation or forcing a cheerful attitude, you are merely burying the toxic waste deeper into your subconscious mind, where it will continue to drain your vital energy and corrupt your natural intuition behind closed doors. When you choose to audit your internal landscape through the practice of intentional solitude, you replace your old habits of defensive avoidance with a state of radical curiosity and honesty. An unexpected wave of envy, a sudden flash of inadequacy, or a heavy pocket of grief is no longer translated by your ego as proof of unworthiness. Instead, you step back into the position of the silent observer and view these difficult emotional disruptions simply as raw, helpful indicators revealing where your psyche is currently starved for growth, alignment, and compassionate integration. You stop punishing yourself for possessing a complex, unedited inner world, and you give yourself full permission to map out your shadows with absolute emotional sobriety. To ground this deep auditing practice into your daily self-development strategy, use your quiet solitude blocks to review your internal patterns with uncompromised honesty. When an uncomfortable thought or an old memory surfaces during your quiet hours, resist your physical instinct to suppress the feeling or look away. Hold your posture. Open your physical journal and ask yourself deep, self-directed questions. Where did this specific fear originally form in my childhood history? How is this old pattern currently limiting my professional expansion? What am I ready to release to reclaim my personal power? Reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty requires you to actively do the heavy internal work that the crowd avoids. By having the immense bravery to look directly into the mirror of your soul without blinking, you strip your hidden programs of their power to manipulate your life, step out of your self-imposed prison, and build a brilliant reality on a rock-solid foundation of authentic wholeness. Part 5. The birth of original thoughts, the creative sanctuary of isolation. When you successfully navigate the initial discomfort of auditing your internal landscape, a magnificent cognitive shift occurs within your mind. You begin to harvest the profound intellectual rewards that are exclusively found within the creative sanctuary of isolation. In our ordinary, overstimulated daily life, our brains are constantly flooded with a continuous stream of secondary thoughts, borrowed opinions, and unexamined trends defined by the collective crowd. Your cognitive bandwidth is entirely occupied by reacting to the ideas of others, leaving your natural intuition completely suppressed beneath the weight of social conformity. But when you gather the unshakable discipline to completely disconnect from the external matrix, your mind naturally baseline stabilizes. The muddy water of your consciousness clears, allowing your original creativity, your unique strategic insights, and your true intellectual voice to rise effortlessly to the surface of your awareness. The legendary inventor, electrical engineer, and deep systematic pioneer Nikola Tesla illuminated this exact creative law when he famously stated that be alone, that is the secret of invention. Be alone, that is when ideas are born. This deep understanding from one of the greatest minds in human history reveals that ultimate creative breakthroughs are never built through committee consensus or casual social brainstorming. Nikola Tesla forces us to realize that original innovation demands an independent space free from the suffocating presence of external judgment. When you insulate your mind from the immediate expectations of society, you grant your intellect full permission to experiment with fresh perspectives, make unexpected systemic connections, and design brilliant solutions that the collective crowd remains completely blind to on your journey to grow 1% better day by day. The fundamental misconception of our modern corporate and academic culture is the dangerous belief that continuous collaboration and constant social feedback are the optimal drivers of high productivity. We are continuously pushed into collaborative workspaces, forced into endless group meetings, and encouraged to share our creative concepts before they have even taken firm root within our minds. This premature exposure instantly kills your original insights, because your ego automatically modifies your ideas to fit the predictable taste and safety parameters of the collective group. You enter a state of creative mediocrity, producing derivative work that merely copies the existing consensus of your industry, completely blind to the fact that you are siphoning away your unique genius. When you choose to treat intentional solitude as your primary creative sanctuary, your relationship with your work undergoes a beautiful evolution. You no longer create your projects or write your strategies to secure immediate validation from a manager or an online community. You create out of a pure sense of intrinsic joy, curiosity, and alignment with your true purpose. You find the absolute courage to sit with a complex problem for hours without lutha. You protect your deep focus blocks like a sacred asset, understanding that a single hour of uninterrupted, sovereign concentration yields a higher volume of brilliant results than an entire week spent in the chaotic noise of continuous collaboration. To integrate this creative discipline into your daily self-development plan, establish a strict routine of sovereign production. Design specific blocks of time throughout your week where you lock your doors, silence your digital communications, and dedicate your total mental power to a single creative task with absolute depth. When you sit in this quiet isolation, stop asking how the external crowd will evaluate your initial drafts. Give yourself full permission to produce rough, experimental, and unedited concepts, allowing your intuition to flow freely across the page without the suffocating restrictions of perfectionism. By having the bravery to build your vision in the quiet dark of solitude, you step out of the trap of derivative output, reclaim your cognitive sovereignty, and successfully deliver a brilliant contribution that completely belongs to you. Part 6. Radical Self-Reliance, Building an Unshakable Inner Foundation. As you continue to cultivate your original creativity within the sanctuary of isolation, you naturally begin to build a powerful psychological structure known as radical self-reliance. Most people walk through their ordinary daily lives in a state of chronic external dependency, relying completely on the approval of their peers, the validation of their SEP, and the predictable comfort of their social circle to maintain their emotional equilibrium. If you navigate your reality under this dependency model, your identity will always remain incredibly fragile, easily destabilized by a single critical comment, a sudden professional setback, or an unexpected change in societal trends. Reclaiming your absolute self-sovereignty demands that you step entirely out of this vulnerable state, using the practice of intentional solitude to construct a rock-solid, unshakable inner foundation that remains perfectly centered regardless of the external weather around you. The profound Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius provided a timeless, piercing light on this essential mental sovereignty when he observed in his personal writings that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This classical master of self-governance forces us to look completely inward for our center of stability. Marcus Aurelius makes it clear that external chaos, public criticism, or the heavy expectations of a collective group hold zero inherent power to fracture your psychological balance unless you actively grant them permission to enter your awareness. True strength means understanding that your mind is a sacred, sovereign fortress. When you focus your energy exclusively on controlling your choices, filtering your inputs, and cultivating present mindfulness, you build an unshakable internal alignment that remains perfectly serene regardless of the external storm. The fundamental misconception of our modern era is the dangerous belief that we can secure real self-confidence by accumulating more indicators of external success. We foolishly assume that if we can just earn a higher corporate title, secure more material luxuries, or expand our social network, our deep-seated feelings of insecurity will eventually dissolve. But confidence that is built on external metrics is merely an illusion, a fragile mass that can be instantly shattered by variables completely outside your control. True, durable self-reliance can only be forged in the quiet fire of isolation. It appears when you have sat present with your deep anxieties, faced your worst fears without looking away, and discovered that your core soul possesses the structural resilience to survive the winter seasons of life entirely on your own terms. When you successfully embody this state of radical self-reliance, your whole perception of your daily existence undergoes a magnificent transformation. You no longer walk through your career or your relationships looking for external approval or validation from the crowd, because you are entirely anchored within your own definition of success. An unexpected piece of criticism, a cold look from a colleague, or a sudden change in societal trends ceases to possess the power to destabilize your emotional baseline. You step back into the sacred position of the silent observer, watching the chaotic fluctuations of the external world pass through your awareness like harmless clouds across a vast, empty sky. You replace your old habits of defensive reactivity with a state of profound stillness, utilizing your preserved mental clarity to take deliberate, impactful actions that serve your true purpose. To integrate this unshakable discipline into your daily self-development routine, practice establishing strict boundaries around your sensory environment. Design specific blocks of time throughout your working hours where you completely silence your devices, disconnect from the digital matrix, and submerge your mind into deep, uninterrupted creative focus. When you sit down in your quiet evening space to reflect, review your attention allocation with absolute honesty, tracking the exact moments when you allowed external expectations to breach your internal sanctuary. Understand that building a powerful psychological filter is a patient, repetitive practice that demands small, daily acts of intentional boundary setting. By choosing to consciously protect your internal peace from the chaos of the crowd, you stop being a helpless leaf blown by the winds of society, reclaim your cognitive sovereignty, and build a brilliant life on your own unshakable terms. Part 7. Returning to the world, standing tall with unshakable presence. When you have successfully cultivated radical self-reliance within the quiet dark of isolation, you arrive at the final, magnificent summit of this cognitive evolution. Most traditional personal development platforms keep you trapped in a perpetual state of isolation, conditioning you to view the external world as an inherently toxic battlefield that you must permanently hide from to protect your peace. But true, sustainable self-sovereignty is never achieved by living in permanent withdrawal or hiding from the challenges of human society. It is born when you gather your gathered internal power and boldly step back into the world as a completely integrated, unshakable, independent force. Returning to the world with unshakable presence means you walk through the chaotic spaces of modern life completely insulated from the crowd's toxic expectations, anchoring your center of gravity entirely within your own independent definition of success. The magnificent American transcendentalist essayist and deep philosophical poet Ralph Waldo Emerson provided a definitive, timeless light on this final state of human maturity when he famously stated that it is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. This profound philosophy serves as the ultimate declaration of personal freedom. Ralph Waldo Emerson challenges us to recognize that true greatness is never built by hiding in an isolated cave, nor by blindly adapting to a social mold. Standing firmly within your unique energy, protecting your original identity, and choosing to act from your deep internal values while being physically surrounded by the chaotic demands of a loud society is the hardest, most magnificent victory a human being can secure on their journey to improve 1% day by day. To fully embody this state of unshakable presence, we must dismantle the deep, common misunderstanding that achieving personal independence requires us to live in constant, aggressive defiance of society. An integrated, sovereign individual does not waste their vital force arguing with the crowd, proving their worth to critics, or loudly declaring their autonomy to the world. True sovereignty operates from a place of profound internal quietude. When you see someone else achieving massive external wealth, receiving widespread applause, or moving at a rapid pace on their own timeline, you no longer experience a single drop of inner panic or bitter envy. Because your dopamine pathways are balanced and your focus is strictly directed toward your inner kingdom, you can genuinely celebrate their light with an open heart, completely secure in the knowledge that their radiance can never obscure or diminish the unique, brilliant path you are paving for yourself. This unshakable internal alignment completely transforms how you navigate your daily life. When you stop treating your environment as a theater to secure social validation, you permanently reclaim your personal power to cultivate deep habits, enrich your creative intellect, and build meaningful, authentic connections with the world. If you encounter an unexpected professional bottleneck, a sudden financial shift, or a period of quiet isolation, you no longer allow your ego to translate those occurrences as signs of human failure. Instead, you view them simply as natural valleys on your evolutionary sine wave, utilizing your preserved mental clarity to adapt, optimize your creation process, and move forward with absolute composure. You become a highly grounded force who cannot be easily shamed, rushed, or manipulated by external opinions because you have already anchored your soul within a sanctuary of unconditioned self-acceptance. To ground this final realization into your daily existence, make a conscious decision today to completely hand over the crown of your life back to your true self. Let go of the exhausting, heavy burden of performing for a society that does not own your destiny. When you sit down in your quiet space tonight to reflect on your journey, look directly into the mirror and commit to being the absolute ruler of your attention, your thoughts, and your actions. Understand that stepping into self-sovereignty is not a rapid event, but a continuous sequence of small, daily choices where you choose to honor your unique rhythm. By having the brave conviction to stay firmly on your own track day by day, you permanently break the walls of the comparison prison, protect your vital energy from depletion, and successfully build a brilliant, free, and magnificent life that completely belongs to you. We have traveled together down a profound path of absolute awakening, starting from the baseline of recognizing the dread of the empty room, discovering how social media noise fragments the self, and understanding the core psychological distinction between loneliness and intentional solitude. We explored the deep work of auditing your internal landscape, unlocked the original creativity hidden in the sanctuary of isolation, learned to construct an unshakable inner foundation of radical self-reliance, and discovered how to return to the world standing tall with absolute presence. You have encountered this message at this precise moment because your consciousness is entirely prepared to receive a fresh wave of transformational energy and step boldly into an unwritten chapter of your life. Real change is undeniably a demanding path that requires fierce consistency, radical bravery, and an unconditional stream of love directed at your own soul. However, remember that every single drop of intentional effort you invest in looking inward today serves as the most durable brick building, a lifetime of absolute peace and structural resilience. Thank you so much for investing your valuable time with us today on Everyday Better You. If this message deeply resonated with your heart, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, share this audio with the people you genuinely love, and leave your personal reflections below in the comments section. Stay completely consistent, keep nurturing your inner world, and continue walking beside us on this beautiful journey of becoming 1% better every single day. Goodbye for now, and we look forward to welcoming you back in our upcoming podcast episodes.